Boy, my friends and family and enemies, I'm still up here on the mountaintop for a moment while they get ready to drop a little geo-engineered storm on the eye. And today, wishing you the greatest day that you could have under the current circumstances. But this is a talk called The Banality of Schadenfreude. The banality of Schadenfreude. Oh, the banality of all the Schadenfreude. When you call other people peasants, but when it comes to spirituality, evil is trapped and dumb. And this is a little talk about how evil is trapped and dumb and how good is freed and wise. From our little friend, the Gemini AI, banality is the state of quality of being dull, unoriginal, or commonplace. And from the Oxford Dictionary, Schadenfreude is pleasure derived from another person's misfortune. This is a basic quality of the archonic possessed mind. If you are a sadistic torturer, you are really a boring, lost loser of a soul. If you have one still. If you are a being who gets perverted torture out of harming another. That's right. If you actually enjoy harming other people, there's something wrong with you. You're mentally ill. You are probably possessed by some false god like an archon or a draconian. Not a joke. Not an exaggeration. That's a fact. At the moment you gleefully harm another, a sensitive person can feel the sick, inverted vibe of the invaders. And by the way, I wishing sending the peace and love to the Full Disclosure Now conference in South Florida. Although I agree with a lot of what had to say in his video he made about them today. And even worse, things that are even worse than that. Like what Dr. Kim had to say about them, some of what she had to say about them. So when the inverted vibe of the invaders acting in your persona, this is, for my entire lifetime, it seemed like evil scumbags have tried to make fun of me. This, when I was a little boy in particular, it's more like behind your back triangulation these days, This idea originates in part from Hannah Arendt's 1963 book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. written by this courageous Jewish woman who fled Germany during the Holocaust, only to write this book exposing evil as boring, common, and unable to think, which is exactly what it is. Have you noticed how evil gradually became more subtle with modern warfare? Like what Dr. Robert Malone calls fifth generational warfare. It became far more subtle or pseudo-invisible, like nanotechnology, like weather weaponry. Whatever decided I had to be shadow banned, nearly all of my comments had to be deleted. I had to do a lot of work and writing notes and making over 500 awakening talks for almost no one. You know, it seemed like at moments that, you know, that was the impression that they wanted me to have. Like I'm speaking out in these mountains, but online, it's just talking to a mirrored police interrogation room, virtually, literally. Like if I'm not being a hidden martyr, I must be doing this at the moment strictly out of love for humanity, which is the case. You know, the narcissists can't understand that. They're too mentally disturbed. But yes, that's how they get away with it, because I do this out of the goodness, primarily. Yet conversely, with the new, on the other hand, I have to hand it to them. It's really super funny to turn the eye into a gamer. You know, guys, I never, only YouTube could covertly have turned me into a gamer. And I don't mean just to get views. I'm talking about when I go on people's chat rooms. Yet, conversely, with the new 2025 YouTube gamification called XP, I can on occasion be the number one most compelling chat room experiencer. Now, this is an example of something that was AI, that was gamified, but I don't really think it's evil, because it's almost, you know what, it's more like the original games. It's more like bringing back games for the sake of fun. I don't know. Maybe I just like it because I could easily be number one on some of these chat rooms. But, or you could say it's the algorithm trying to pull the eye into the dark side in another way, you know, like it always tries to. But I can be the number one XP. If I'm really passionate enough to do it, like, excuse me, if they got to be, you know, one of my fave shows. This demonstrates that soulless algorithm Luciferic AI bricks can wall off those who use their human or divine powers to share truth. Evil has no respect and tries to prevent yours. So, you know, they force you to compete. They force you to survive with this. They force you to comply with things, you know, as much as possible. As much as you're willing to participate in compliance. So, for the most part, I mean, if you're peaceful, so, anyways. They have no such thing as a boundary. The dark side knows no such thing as boundaries. They get inside yours. Why did Christ, Yeshua, then later our favorite martyrs of the 20th century have to be hung and shot according to public perception? Well, maybe it's because you, pardon the eye, you can't keep the human farm forced suffering, memory wipe, soul laundry cycle of people notice evil is tyrannical and cowardly. You cannot keep the human farm, forced suffering, memory wipe, attempted permanent soul laundry cycle. Oh, they really don't want me to say it. If people notice evil is tyrannical and cowardly and useless when it comes to self-value, or self-efficacy, self-respect, creativity, and growth. I mean, it can help everyone a tiny bit to realize where they're wrong. It can only destroy, block, steal, circumvent, and take over our consciousness through various ways, from the overt use of various ways of violence, terrifying us with fear, weather warfare, coercion, all the ways down to the little inconsistencies and cognitive biases in our dogma and rules that cause folks to get in a mental rut or cage. If evil is a genius, it is a suicidal genius that can only chain itself further. Okay? When you think about it, the only purpose that there is for darkness, if you will, is so that we could experience the power of light to growth and expansion and balance, light and dark. But it didn't arise. It cannot arise for its own sake. A shadow cannot come up and take over. A shadow has to intimidate. A shadow has to have something of the light to mess with, to energize on. It doesn't. It can only exist because of the light. And so you are the sun in your heart and your brain, your solar plexus. You are the triple sunshine, the Holy Ghost in a flesh suit. If you're awakened, and that is what both energizes and terrifies the fallen ones the most. If they want it, if they can energize, if they can steal your energy, it gives them a lot of power. So that's why all this stuff is the way it is. So it's only going to chain itself further because that's all it's ever known how to do. The Ouroboros can only eat itself, kill itself, recycle its children. Kronos eats the heads off its children, recycles them and all that, or whatever. Like this is what their religion says. Those who instated space fence through their massive tyrannical takeover of the entire ionosphere is a good thing. That's what they think. But a lot of those responsible are in human bodies. Evil and its narcissist through mentally tricky and evil and its narcissist CEOs, for example, though mentally tricky and adept at invisible harm, is morally retarded, emotionally sterile, creatively incapable of jack shit except, copying and mimicking. Unless it causes harm or some loosh. Unless it feeds the demons a little bit. Unless it feeds the parasitical master interdimensional parasites a little bit. Then it's cool. Thus, that's what it usually does. It's a master of infiltration. Ever noticed how full of filth the normal modern human's psychological perception is? Whether the individual believes in remaining a financial slave, a tyrant, a tyrant of the matrix, controller, so to speak, or even becomes, as I have been for a very long time, a discerning hermit renunciate, and like coerced into trying to focus on healing. The caustic, moldy encryption of a powerful, ancient, soul-sucking, loose factory planet keeps on yelling internally in the human's mind, "You are nothing. You'll be worth anything. You'll never be worth anything. Evil always wins. It has no soul, and yet it convinces most humans it is. It owns their souls, and it is them. It owns their souls forever in perpetuity. How does Kronos hijack figure in the vampiric tyranny of evil's continuance? Think about how long, for 1,000,000 years, it's been surviving this way. By sucking off everyone and making everyone suck. By making as many people suckers, whether they were willing to be violence or martyrs, victims or tyrants. All these beings, all these souls became suckers for the grandest suckers of all. The suckers who created the sucker grid. And that's the false self as well. So, it's always going to be in their thoughts as long as this machinery, internal etheric machinery and implants are there. Always going to be in there. Obviously, like my naive pseudo-freedom of speech from a campsite on YouTube, the creative, truth-telling, soul-empowered, inspirited human must be kept small, ineffective, socially worthless, if you are not a good capitalist. In this system, your influence must stay moot. Whereas in the spiritual dimensions, evil must remain a very powerful, soulless, ballless coward who takes all souls, bodies in their entire place. That's what this last battle, these last half a decade has been about. This is my planet. You are all here on the prison planet or loose factory farm, or if you're lucky, the country club loose farm. Country club prison system, psychologically speaking, unless you're one of the tiny amount of people who, figure it out how to escape and get free and help others to become free. That's what most people, it seems like, you're in some kind of role on the farm or in the prison. Most people, not everyone, but How can this filth remain in its magnificent, utter, royal mental trash if I am entitled and yet do not serve others? Does that mean the evil controls one thing? Does that mean the evil controllers are trying to insist I remain in a mentally online cubbyhole of a houseless, collapsed narcissist? They wish, because evil is very banal. So it tries to make you banal. Okay? It's jealous. Evil is envious. It wishes it could be creative. It doesn't know how to create shit. It can only kill, just destroy. It doesn't have the capacity to love, to have respect or understanding, understanding, overstanding. Only self-destruction, only self-harm. Enjoying others' suffering is for archonic losers in the spiritual reality. No one who's aware would do this shit, okay? This is what makes some of these people I've dealt with in the past, obviously, like, on the high on the scale. But, you live and learn. Hopefully, if you're really aware and you're willing to do the shadow work. But, people, you never want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say, because people all have their things they can teach you. Teach you a lot, But, But what is more common in Lucifer 4's dumbed down, DNA unplugged, modern human slave is the banality of Schadenfreude. I was called weird over hundreds of times as a child. And I was beat up many times. And so it took me a while to figure it out. Why was I so offensive to these people that I didn't know or whatever? I would play alone on the playground at recess until I started to get tyrannical and used Schadenfreude myself on a pushover teacher in high school math class. I think it was making her look stupid, and it was funny because I always had a mild amount of desire to become a comedian, but this was a class that Brooke took algebra into 2 years or pre-algebra into 2 years, and a bunch of melanin-rich Southern teenagers in there, and they thought I was the funniest guy, and so anything I said, they'd laugh. So it was like I got a little experience of being a comedian there, and whenever I'd make fun of the teacher, I rarely ever had any friends or approval. But then I didn't like the feeling of that Schadenfreude. It's a crappy feeling. Again, it's archonic. Look at what the mainstream media and popular video platforms promote. Look at what possesses for reality these days. See how important it is to evil for us to stay little, stay 666, stay away physically and spiritually, mentally from everyone else. Afraid. See how important it is for evil for us to stay little, afraid. Matrix batteries. Evil lost its heart and soul eons ago, folks, and thus it must project and program littleness. Its inability to discern or create, and its Schadenfreude into our subconscious. Because if we agree in the aggregate, okay, so if the majority of the people believe that Schadenfreude is normal, then this creates what Arendt was speaking about in creating her brilliant term, the banality of evil. And in the long term, sprinkle on copious amounts of the industrial poison cartels of the M. and geoengineering, centuries of endless wars, and there you have it. Modern humans are dumbed down, evil, sometimes, or they're willing to accept evil, violent, maliciously sadistic farm animals caught in the mental slavery, or they're willing to accept those type of beings controlling them as farm animals caught in the mental slavery of beast survival mode. We must learn to pay more attention to creation and goodness. See, like the beautiful mountain. I don't know if you can see it here because the sun isn't shining too much on it, but I wanted to share it. Not doom scrolling and black pilling. That's what evil wants. If we simply agree with Arendt, it does not serve our awakening much, but it is a step. When we begin to act on this knowledge, knowing we can still do good and serve others, awakening, even though we'll be targeted or attacked in some way. The Archon Wardens and their Hell Eat 1% dogs are not going to give up easily. I mean, this has been escalating for 1,000,000 years. Okay? So, how do we participate within this sick system? I mean, some people, like one that's speaking at the conference right now, believe that their job is to tear it down by exposing it. We work to awaken the truth of sovereignty and peace within and around us etherically. We learn to practice what we preach. We be the change that we want to be in those, or that, because that is what we're really teaching, whatever. So, however, in learning to discern the bigger picture, which is what I'm hoping to share with you here, that I've amassed. So, we learn why evil has to appear banal, why it has to take over secretly. And hiding in religions and governments, crimes and diseases. We see it as a very powerful, for a strictly mental, sterile, 3D left brain consciousness. We see that you got to understand that, the so-called dark side, evil, loser 4, the light bearer of torture, the torture bearer has done a great job as far as a 3-dimensional left brain kind of a being with no feelings could do. It did very good for itself whilst turning humans into its cannon fodder psychologically and hydrogenated gutworm blimps of massive loosh, literally. In the age of Aquarius is all about communication, okay? So, and digital gadgets too, and humanitarianism. So thus, the online world had to be full of censorship, tyrannized by censorship, and co-opted with DARPA and the other agencies to control. The grandiose piracy of sucking vampiric archonic hijacks has been very impressive. Okay? The grandiose piracy and success of sucking vampire archonic hijacks have been very impressive, but the more we research into the powers of evil, the more we notice it has no foundation. Only fear, killing, wars, rapes, lies, threat. Yet it has become normalized to be a sadistic, selfish cog of a creep in a wheel of samsara, a wheel of suffering, and a planet that it just loves to just have this permanent trauma bond Stockholm syndrome to its ET slave masters, it seems like. Whereby obviously the scum always rise to the top while the really good are hidden. They have to hide. They don't want to be attacked. Or they're either that or they're ignored, shadow banned, deleted, attacked, killed, or gaslit. When John Lennon said, "We're bigger than God," he sure sounded like a narcissist, yet the dark side or deep state felt they had to kill him, because though he was being already perhaps used unbeknownst to him as a new cage operator himself for sure, he seeded ideas of truth also into the popular culture. Like in his song, Imagine, how dare he say that? If you expose evil as both powerful to the ignorant and stupid to the awake or the aware, how do you then relate to other ensouled humans, especially if they're psychologically enslaved on the psychological prison? It helps to accept that evil has a lot of ability and organization. Very, very strong in organization and money and ability. Yet they can, the demiurgos has a lot of building capabilities, but Mammon has built a lot, but he has huge, massive muscles and built a lot of edifices, but he has no brains. He has no head, literally. And They have a lot of good things, good and evil and powerful things they can do, yet they can only exist on a strictly mental plane. So Schadenfreude could not become popular if Luciferianism or evil had any love, soul, or feelings. Okay? Higher on the scale of narcissistic personality disorder, a person has little to no empathy. Imagine that. I mean, it's important to remember. It's a horrid fact of this simulacrum that we're in here. A human shell with no empathy is a person with NPD. A person on the scale of NP an NPC or it has escalated to a human shell with no empathy is a person with NPD, an NPC, or has escalated to becoming a full-on possession, a person who's possessed, an NPE. So anyone who took the experiment could turn into an NPC if they don't watch out, but a person on the scale of NPD or an NPC, it's very, very easily become an NPE. Yes, this planet has been repurposed into a psycho-illogical hell realm, loose factory, but the talented purveyors of our current system are adamantly soulless, banal, moral cowards who must hide to rule. Goodness and light will always be the real creator within us. And that is why all of these inversions had to be propped up into this current house of cards, turning into a phoenix rapidly these days. You know, an Ouroboros house of cards, a snake bird, a Quetzalcoatl Ouroboros house of cards made out of money, burning itself up in a phoenix. When you think about it, all of the aberrant, fake, fun-making, bully clowning was incomprehensible to her, to Christ Sophia. It didn't make any sense. It took her a long time to figure out what had even occurred. It didn't make any sense. She was tied up in knots for years to try to figure it out. For you are all portions of the rays of the light of the original creator, Christ Sophia. No matter who you are, no matter how evil or how good, how banal you are, some portion of your essence or what created you is still that. You are individualized. If you're awakening, you are individualized aspects, mirrors or holograms of a fraction of her love. In the mainstreaming of inversion, in the recent half-decade of attacks in particular, evil has shown its strategic brilliance and adamant moral retardation and degradation. Will you attain at least a little of the freed mind it requires to chuck these implants, do your inner work, and realize whether you're still a co-creator of a hellish state or a blessing or blissing out? You remember, you are the creator of your perspective. You are co-creating this, whatever it is. You are part of the creatorship of this spaceship Earth. You are the artist if you still live. And of course, if you enjoyed this and you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or follow me on Odyssey and Rumble for uncensored versions of these truths. Several that can't be here on, or you might be watching it if you're watching on the alphabet. So, and of course, if you have the courage, my family, create a great moment, create a great day, create a great era as long as you possibly can. Remain in the light of the holy, of the wholeness, the burning fire of the Christos, the sacred purity of the divine Mother Christ Sophia's heart in your perception as much as possible, because it's the reality, it's the actuality when you're awakened.